Hi, folks. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for this very exciting session. My name is Erin Aoyama, and I'm part of the Tadaima Steering Committee. I'm so delighted to welcome Linda Sato Adams, Stephanie Mieko Rowe, and Janice Nakano Fadden, who will be speaking about some of their work tonight, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So please leave any questions or comments that you would like to ask the panelists in the chat, and we will get to as many as we can. So with that, I'd like to welcome Stephanie, Janice, and Linda. And take it away, folks. Thank you so much. Hi.
Hey. Okay, well, let's see. I think we can go ahead and put up our slides real quick. But again, yes, hi, I'm Stephanie. So these were just some questions to get you started. They were actually questions that we had while we were working on this project. So we kind of felt like they were pretty relevant to what we're about to do, just to get you in that mindset. But we'll go ahead and get started. So our presentation is Inquiry Through Graphic Novel Narratives. We are part of the JACL DC Chapter as well. And before we introduce ourselves, I just wanted to go through and break down our title a little bit. So inquiry is defined as an act of asking for information or an investigation. And narrative is defined as a spoken or written account of connected events or a story. Investigation and storytelling have been the driving forces behind our project. But before we delve too deeply into that, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves now. So I'm Stephanie Mieko Rowe, and visual art has always been a passion of mine. I grew up reading lots of comics and lots of manga, and I still do to this day. I have a Bachelor's of General Fine Arts and a Master's of Arts in Teaching from MICA, which is the Maryland Institute College of Art. And I also have several years of experience teaching art for grades K through 8. So my picture is actually a drawing that a past student has done for me. And when I look at it, it reminds me of my love for teaching, as well as how important it is to educate the next generation of global learners and citizens. I strongly believe that art is a versatile vehicle to not only cultivate important dispositions such as reflection of self and others, but also to discuss difficult topics from the past and ones that we face in the present day.
Hi, and my name is Linda Sato Adams. So my self-portrait, which is before selfies were done, tells the story of my love of art and nature, and the style demonstrates an influence that comic book illustrations had on me. I was an art educator in Montgomery County Public Schools in Maryland, and I taught at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. I later became a project manager for the new teacher induction program, a recruiter for human resources, and I finished my career in the curriculum office as the supervisor of fine arts. In retirement, I've supervised student teachers for Towson University, and I've worked as an administrative consultant for the National Japanese American Memorial Foundation. I'm currently the co-president of the JACL DC Chapter, and I'm working hard on this project.
Good evening, everyone. My portrait was done by Stephanie Rowe. Thank you so much. What a great artist you are. Thank you. My name is Janice Nakano Fadden, and I make sure all the time when I introduce myself, I include my family name so that my family background is clearly there. My family was incarcerated at Tule Lake, but I was born after their release. My career has been in education as a teacher at all levels and as a principal and director of elementary instruction and curriculum. In retirement, I have returned to Montgomery County Public Schools, which we call AKA MCPS, substituting as administrator and hearing officer. I have also served in various capacities in the Japanese American Citizens League and mentored principals in a nearby university. My passionate interest in this graphic novel project is to make a place in the U.S. history elementary curriculum for students who have previously been left out of the American story, and to highlight the Japanese American story in a format that is accessible to all students, young and old, with various learning styles. This all leads us to our story. The beginning, once upon a time. Now we go to the why. Why did we begin this inquiry through graphic novel narratives? Well, looking back on it, when we started, with the idea in 2022. This is when we were aware of the JACL Legacy Fund grant. It was announced in our chapter. The JACL DC Chapter discussed whether we would be interested in pursuing a grant, and if so, for what kind of project. Well, we knew that graphic novels were popular and becoming more and more popular with young children and older students and folks as well. So one member suggested the possibility of using the grant to create a graphic novel. There was a lot of discussion about this amongst ourselves and the members, and a lot of excitement as well for this idea. And what if we were to use this graphic novel as a teaching tool? With this in mind, we wondered, would Montgomery County Public Schools be interested in collaborating with us on such a project? Now, we knew that MCPS had recently approved an Asian American history course as an elective in high schools. So could we somehow connect the project with this high school course with a project on the elementary level? So we contacted our social studies supervisor about the possibility of collaborating with us. At that time, MCPS had just approved a new curriculum for social studies to be rolled out in 2023 to 2024 school year. MCPS was interested in a project for grade 5, and they specifically asked for stories about the Japanese American immigration, incarceration, and anti-Asian hate crimes for their new framework. Our graphic novel could have an impact, we learned, on 12,000 fifth grade students each year. We were excited and anxious to go. Now, looking at the next slide, you will see the framework in its specific verbiage. Unit 3, for example, says that the challenges, the overarching topic is the challenges of American economic, political, and civic life from 1900 to today. And the content topics specifically are freedom of information, individuals as tools for change, institutions as tools for change, and contesting, upholding, and redefining freedom rights and citizenship civil rights. So those are the frameworks and the content objectives. So do you see the connections for our Japanese American stories within these content topics? Not only was a social studies supervisor interested in collaborating with us, but she also said that they would hold a place in their curriculum for our project. So stay tuned to see how this has unfolded.
So another question some of you may be wondering is, why a graphic novel? You know, aren't those mostly all about like fictional superheroes like Captain Underpants or Spider-Man? And while yes, there are many graphic novels that have been focused on fighting crime, but nowadays graphic novels have been utilized to discuss so much more. So why a graphic novel? Well, for one, graphic novels simultaneously utilize text and visuals. They also appeal to older and younger audiences alike. Currently, there's not many graphic novels that are included as part of an educational curriculum, but considering the rising popularity with our target audience, 5th grade, creating a graphic novel just seemed like the obvious choice to us. So as we decided on a graphic novel, but we had to do some research first. What has been done before? So in terms of graphic novels that are aimed for our target audience, there are actually a lot. But one in particular that Linda and I enjoyed is on the left. It's called New Kid. It's a fictional story about an artistically inclined 12-year-old student who transfers into a private school and the culture shock he experiences. It is described as a timely and honest graphic novel about starting over at a new school where diversity is low and the struggle to fit in is real. This book is actually also included in the Battle of the Books, which in my opinion really goes to show how far graphic novels have come in mainstream culture. This book was fantastic for multiple reasons, but for our purposes, we loved how relatable the main characters' experiences were, how entertaining it was, and how it just had a larger message about students of color and how they feel like a minority in their school interlaced through the plot. Another great graphic novel that we were inspired by over on the right is They Called Us Enemy, which some of you may recognize. It follows the true story of George Takei and his experience in the incarceration camps during his childhood. This book is considered nonfiction, and one of the reviews from the School Library Journal described it as an evocative memoir that shares stories of the nation's past, draws heartbreaking parallels to the present, and serves as a cautionary tale for the future. We love this novel because it is innovative, informative, and offers a new lens on an important part of American history. There have been many other great biographical accounts in other books, but we found that this story worked particularly well as a graphic novel. For instance, instead of only reading about the emotions of the characters, you can actually see it on their faces, which we believe makes the story a lot more relatable and compelling, especially to younger audiences. Well, there are so many parts of these novels that we like. We wanted to combine some of our favorite aspects of each book into one. Could we create a graphic novel that is informative, relatable to our target audience, and offers a new take on the Japanese American experience during World War II?
And this leads us to our next chapter, the inspiration or the what. So what were our inspirations for our graphic novel? Like what They Called Us Enemy, we wanted to incorporate many real accounts of Japanese Americans during World War II. We're very fortunate to be able to contact 3 members in our community to interview as primary source material, narratives of people's life experiences. You will see bits and pieces of their stories incorporated into our fictional novel, as they were key resources in telling our story. Terry Shima turned 100 years old this year, and he is still going strong. Terry was a member of the 442, and he provided expertise on details about the Nisei soldiers during World War II. He's also a recipient of the Presidential Medal of Honor under President Obama. Alice Takamoto is 96 years young, and she and her family were incarcerated in Jerome, Arkansas. Also 96 years young is Mary Murakami. Her family was incarcerated in Topaz, Utah. Now, both of these ladies offer detailed descriptions of their memories of what life was like in the camp. All 3 of these folks, they have honestly been a dream to work with. They have interesting stories to share. They're very interested in the project. They bring a real positive energy, curiosity, and attention to details of the incarceration camps and the Nisei Army statistics. We hope that we've honored their stories appropriately in this graphic novel. We have been very fortunate to be working with a very talented illustrator, Vicky Ya, who's been able to incorporate our first-person accounts with historical imagery. Parts of the story that are occurring in the present day, the panels are in full color. And for the historical pieces, we asked the artist to use black and white to give the impression of an old-time newspaper. We gave photographs to Vicky to use them for inspiration, but they were not requirements for her drawings. Our collaboration with the artist was very close, and although we gave her photos for ideas, which she really appreciated, we wanted her to be able to use her own interpretation. So you can see that there's a photograph on the top left-hand side of the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and how the illustrator was able to use this to effectively show how it impacted family members. We took a quote from Norman Mineta, who said it was the first time he saw his father cry because the land of his birth was attacking the land of his heart. And on the right-hand side, you're going to see an image that was inspired by Alice Takamoto's story. Both of her parents were Japanese language teachers, and they were arrested shortly after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. At that time, she was a very young teen, and she was left at home with one older sister who was in high school. She had 2 older sisters who returned home to help out, but they did not see their mother again until 3 months later at the Santa Clara detention facility. And they didn't see their father again until they were all incarcerated in Jerome, Arkansas. Now, this illustration is a story from Mary Murakami, who said that her sister's picture was taken when she was waving goodbye to some friends. And later, she found her picture in a newspaper with a headline saying the Japanese were happily going to camp. which again speaks to the propaganda found in media of the time.
All right, take a look at this slide. Again, here is an actual photo of the event when it happened on the left. On the right, it was used, the photo, as an inspiration for our illustrator, Vicki, to illustrate her interpretation of events at that time. So we had a very close working relationship with our illustrator, and we are very, very pleased with the team that has evolved. And we use in our research, have found actual photos that help give Vicki an idea for her drawings for the story. This particular slide shows the family of Mary Murakami. Again, this comes from Mary Murakami's story. This shows her family members getting ready to board the bus for the Tan Ferran horse race track. Each family has a tag that they are wearing. Each tag has on it a number. The number is the number that was assigned to her family number, and it's the actual number 22416. Now imagine how you would feel if someone gave you a number instead of a name to identify you and to call you by. So their family number was 22416, and then after each number was a letter. The letter would indicate which member of the family they were calling or identifying. So Mary's father was called 22416A, Mary's mother 22416B, and the elder sister 22416C, and so on and so forth. A rather upsetting, degrading experience. Here's another photo from Mary's personal archive, and that is a photo of her parents, her mom and her dad. This is a photo or a copy of the photo that her father took. And the reason why he took the photo was to give it to his children. He wanted his children to have an image of their parents. So in the event that they would be separated during the incarceration process, he wanted his children to be able to identify, locate, and be able to reunite with the family. This slide to me is a very poignant one because of its content and because of the way that Mary remembered it. So I'm going to quote what she said about this event, but first I want to explain what it is. It is her, we called him Uncle Joe, but it's really her oldest brother, Joe, who was drafted into the U.S. Army during World War II. He is now going off to war, but he's saying goodbye to his family first. Now, he could not say goodbye to them without a barbed wire fence in between, signifying that he was on the outside going off to war to fight for the United States, and they were on the inside incarcerated by the government. Mary's comment was, "My parents were on one side of the barbed wire and Joe was leaving on the other side. They were only about 10 feet away from the open gate, but they couldn't go around the gate. This was one of the saddest things for me."
So as we discussed what to include in our graphic novel, we found that it would be almost impossible to incorporate all the information that we wish we could include, such as bios of influential Japanese Americans, general statistics about camps, more elaborated information on the 442nd, the 100th Infantry Battalion, and MIS. But we felt that all of this was important to the history, but we were unsure of the best way to include it in our story, especially when we had limited space and pages. So our solution was to create and incorporate infographics at the end of every single chapter. And so infographics, for those of you that aren't sure, are graphic visual representations of information, data, or knowledge. Incorporating these infographics would offer us a lot of flexibility when chunking it or presenting plenty of historical facts, which there are plenty of. And they can also enrich the learning experience by allowing us to supplement additional information quickly and clearly to the students. For example, this infographic on the right is meant to explain the differences between the Japanese American generations. It's an important part of telling our story because we use the term several times, but there was not a great place in the story to include it naturally, so we turned it into an infographic. Linda, I think you're muted.
Thank you. We're also including inquiry questions throughout our graphic novel for students and teachers to respond to. Inquiry questions typically are not yes or no questions or questions that have one right answer, but they provide the opportunity for multiple responses based on the student's reasonings, reflection, and hopefully leading them to a bigger understanding of the content. Now, here are two samples of inquiry questions based around the forced removal of the Japanese Americans. The first inquiry question, how did the Executive Order 9066 violate the rights of the Japanese Americans? And you can see the ties below that, the question, to the social studies and writing objectives that are found in the curriculum. The second two inquiry questions are at the bottom. Ask, do you have an item in your family with historical or sentimental value? And what happens to a family's history when these items are lost or destroyed? These questions inquire about how a family's history is passed on to future generations, and who you are is made up of your family's history and stories. When these things are absent, there is a disconnect to your history and your culture. Who are you? And what happened to Japanese Americans was very similar in this fact of the loss of culture and knowledge and history. So one of the challenges that we faced was developing a story or a content that was understandable and relatable to fifth graders. So I was discussing this project with a neighbor and her daughter, who was in fifth grade at the time. And we talked about World War II and the incarceration. And it was quite evident that the daughter had no concept or frame of reference to this period of time in history. So it was really important for us to consider how to tell the story in a way that a fifth grader could comprehend what is happening and when. We felt that by placing the setting at the National Japanese American Memorial to Patriotism during World War II would provide students with symbolism and context in order to bring our story to life. MCPS was also looking for local stories, so placing this in Washington, D.C. actually makes it more accessible to our students and to our families.
Okay, so the next part of planning also included the creation of our main characters. We knew that we wanted the main character to be a fifth grader, obviously to make it more relatable to our target audience. And we knew we wanted a grandmother figure to help walk them through the memorial and the history. We decided on a girl for the main character, but we also wanted to include a boy character for equal representation. So we ended up giving her a brother who we decided would be younger, around 6. So in this way, we could offer the lens of both an older child and a younger child. Our rationale was that children could react differently to hearing about that darker part of history, and we wanted both the main character and her brother to ask questions that we thought our target audience would potentially want to ask as well. So this led to the creation of Grandma May, Emmy, and Theo. Let's lead us on to our third chapter, the conundrum, or the how. How were we going to pull this off? Well, that leads us into our first big how question, which was, well, one, how do we weave multiple true accounts into one compelling and informative story? Again, we have so many first-person accounts that we want to stay true to, and we have a lot of great input, but, you know, it's kind of making sure that it's all cohesive and it's all compact and it's all compelling at the same time. And then for our second question, well, let me just start out by saying, you know, at least in my experience, there were a lot of books that I was required to read when I was in school. And unfortunately, not all of them were memorable enough for me to remember as I got older, which leads us to the predicament, how can we get our target audience to care about the story? So as we pondered this question, the thought occurred to me that I should probably just try to put myself in a fifth grader's shoes again. You know, if I were a fifth grader, what would draw me in and keep me interested in the story? And that led to the next realization that some of my English teachers always used to say, which is write what you know. So on the left, you can see a picture of me. That was actually me in fifth grade. And on the right, you can see a picture of Emmy. You can maybe see a little bit of a resemblance there. But basically, my experience in 5th grade, I was born in North Carolina, and I was one of the only 2 Asians in my entire elementary school. The Japanese American World War II experience was never really discussed. If it was mentioned, there was little to no detail given, and that's from textbooks or just from my own grandparents. And I'm half Japanese, and half Caucasian. And, early on, I really struggled to feel connected to that part of my heritage. And even after I found out about what happened during World War II, many of my friends, when I tried to talk to them about it, had no idea what I was even saying, which is very much like Emmy in that way. And I just remember being shocked at how everyone dismissed it, probably because it just didn't affect anyone that they personally knew, unlike me. My grandpa's family was in Minidoka, and my grandma's family was in Tule Lake. And so, as we were all discussing this in our experiences, being a Japanese American or just minority in general, I made a joke about one question that, I still get to this day, which was, people would say, well, where are you from? And then I would say, Charlotte or, North Carolina. And they would say, no. But where are you really from? And, as a joke, I said, oh, that could be just the title of our book, right? But then Linda was like, wait, this has potential. So that's actually how we led to our title, because we thought that it could apply to a lot of different groups as well too. And so that is the title of our graphic novel.
All right, so we're now on to the evolution of the story. This new thought about where are you, but where are you really from, leads us to our next chapter, and that's the evolution, or the where. Where could this story take place? Now, this title, but where are you really from, sparked a new idea within us. Could this be written in a way that gives a voice and resonates with other marginalized members or minorities of society? As the response we received was a resounding yes. One of the things we have done was provide MCPS with a draft of our scripts. And the feedback from the team, the social studies team, was that this graphic novel presented a universal story which each one on the team could relate to. So we thought children will be able to see themselves in our graphic novel and might have personal experiences that relate to what they are reading, such as experiences being a minority in a school as well. Friends, what's the potential here if we think about diversity and representation and multiple perspectives? And our district is becoming more and more diverse, as is our country. So we knew with this opportunity of providing a graphic novel that we should make the most of it by adding some friend characters for Emmy. Including these friends would also mean we would need to change the setting to a school and have the memorial become more of a secondary setting. When creating her friends, we wanted to highlight the large diversity in our district and the fact that it is also in each of our student bodies in our schools. We wanted to include as many different ethnicities as we could so that even more students could envision themselves in the story. And with the addition of new characters comes new perspectives.
So adding in friends for Emmy opened up a whole new realm of possibilities for where the rest of our story could go. For example, how would Emmy react after learning about all of this new information? Would she tell her friends about it? Would they care? What if our characters got into a disagreement or had a miscommunication? How would they resolve it? How could her experiences motivate her to want to make a change? So adding in more characters means that we, again, had even more opportunities to showcase different themes or topics through our characters' interactions, discussions, and personal choices. Themes such as empathy, community, reflection, and social activism, just to name a few. Now, if I were in your shoes listening to this, I would say, wow, that is a lot to put in one story. How can they hit on all of those themes and more? Which is a valid question. So let me go ahead and walk you through our main storyline, starting with our main character, Emmy. So Emmy, like myself, is half Japanese. She was born and raised in the US. And so our story begins at school where she is given an assignment to investigate her family heritage. This basically kind of leads her to realizing she doesn't know the answer to a lot of these questions that the teacher is asking her to inquire about. And so that leads her to really thinking a lot about her family background. So again, themes of family. And so through her inquiries, she discovers the dark part of her family's history. And from this, she feels conflicted. You know, she feels like it's not fair. It's not well known about. Unfortunately, it's already in the past. You know, you can't change it now, but it still feels wrong. And so that kind of leaves her feeling kind of odd, you know, thinking like, well, where do I belong? Kind of having a little mini crisis of like identity of her family and of herself. And so she tries to talk to her friends about it with varying reactions. And with one of her friends, an argument breaks out. And that kind of goes to touch on the theme of like having just a clash of cultures, and also, you know, how important communication is, or miscommunication in this point. And so through that, she ends up meeting a new friend who shows her empathy and kindness and listens to her and her, you know, her thoughts about this matter. And again, helps her while she just works out her feelings. And so fast forwarding a little bit, I'm not going to give you guys everything because we want you to still read the story. But she presents her finished assignment to her class, which was inspired about learning about her family's past, which is really showing that she's reflecting on herself and her experiences. And she makes up with her old friend. She introduces her new friend to the group. And, you know, through all of this, she feels like she's motivated to make a change. You know, like this has been a pivotal moment for her. And so she recruits her community to help her with her active social activism. And again, keeping it vague because spoilers. The end result is something that can be appreciated by her community and instills hope for the future. So I hope that taking you through this, you know, short version of the storyline, you can kind of see how very realistic and possible it is to touch on so many of these themes and make it into one cohesive story as well. And then the other part too is, you know, creating this background for Emmy gives her personality more layers. And I think that allows the audience to get to know her better and thus relate to her a lot more easily.
All right. So what is the takeaway for our readers? What's the big idea? What did we want to inspire them to think, to do, to become? This is part of what we were thinking. We want students' curiosity to lead them to an action. We want them to learn more about a topic, to want to do research and to actually do the research. We want them to take action of some sort based on something that motivated them from their learnings. We want them to become self-motivated and eventually become lifelong learners open to different points of view. Critical thinkers, that's the goal. We want students to be able to analyze information and arguments, claims, and evidence. We want them to make judgments or evaluations based on evidence, make inferences using inductive and deductive reasoning, making decisions and solving problems through their own thinking, not give them the answers, but instead ask open-ended questions so that they can formulate their own answers and become responsible citizens, not only of our country, but also of the world. So through practice of critical thinking, students will be able to not only solve problems, but also be able to come up with new and creative ideas to do so. We want them to have emotional intelligence and become open-minded people who listen to other points of view, are empathetic, and become reflective, self-aware, self-regulative human beings. That is why our graphic novel does not give answers, as we said before when we were talking about the inquiry questions, but instead provides open-ended questions to motivate students to think.
So, why do superheroes combine forces? to overcome obstacles that get in their way. So what kinds of obstacles did we face?
Okay.
Well, this is the part where we tell you what not to do or how we did it. We started our novel actually in the middle. So we then had to fill in a front half and a back half of the novel. So having a cohesive story was really a little bit challenging. And then we had a lot of big ideas that took us in various directions with the story. And as we did our research, we really had to make decisions about what to include. Having the infographics was actually a way of providing additional information without lengthening the novel. And having interviewed 3 members of our community, they were trusting us with their stories. And we had to ensure that we were honoring what we were given. Now, writing a script was something very new, especially when you're trying to include specific descriptions of people and items to include in a scene. So this was really a lot more like a director in a movie, thinking through what to include in each panel that we were creating. And we asked a lot of people for feedback, and therefore we got a lot of feedback. And the feedback was excellent, but unfortunately, not all the feedback may be included. So we really had to consider what to curate, what to keep in and what to leave out. Pacing was also tricky, trying to determine how much information should go into each panel, as well as how do we stay within our timeline. And then funding was really an unknown for us. We originally were thinking that we may have maybe 5 or 6 pages per topic. Our topics were immigration, incarceration, and anti-Asian hate. And now we're up to 7 chapters. What started with a very small grant has blown up considerably as we need to pay for the illustrations, which is where the majority of the funding is going to be used, which will include maps and infographics. And we're also hoping to have enough funding for translations, as we have immersion schools, Spanish, French, and Chinese immersion schools, as well as providing print copies, because MCPS was actually interested in having this originally in digital format.
All right, so the question is, how did we address all these hurdles? And I think Linda was specific in giving us some details. It was through teamwork, and we had a wonderful team. People that we talked to about our project became very excited about the story and the purpose of creating the story. So through teamwork, that's how we were able to overcome some of these hurdles. So listed here are some of the specific players on the team. And I wanted to pull out legal counsel because you may wonder why we included someone like that on our team. Well, we learned during this whole process as well. And one thing we learned was the importance of drawing up a contract for our illustrator. So our illustrator, who actually is currently living in Lisbon, Portugal, had different set of, legal issues and rules and guidelines that she went by with regard to particularly the notion of intellectual property. So we needed our legal counsel, and thank goodness for him that he was able to provide us the expertise for drawing up a contract that was agreeable between us and our wonderful illustrator. And the rest is financial advisor. I will be saying in the next slide some of the people who have helped us with funding, and we are forever grateful to them. And of course, the educators, our teachers, media specialists, curriculum trainers, and many, many, many others. So there we have it for our team and our sponsors. As I said, we are forever grateful for the JACL DC Chapter, JACL National, Japanese American Veterans Association, and the National Japanese American Memorial Foundation, as well as a relatively newcomer, and that is the Japanese American Community Foundation. We thank all of them for their help and their donations in making this project possible.
So when we speak of our supporting characters to our project, we wanted to include these 3 people. Vickia is our illustrator extraordinaire. Finding the right artist was really essential in bringing our story to life, and she has been amazing to work with. very collaborative, and she has done a ton of her own research to learn about the history in order to accurately portray the period and the people. Jamie Noguchi has been our comic advisor, and he's been instrumental in helping us determine a cost per page, what should be included in that cost, and the expectations for illustration. He just recently completed illustrating the graphic novel, The School for Extraterrestrial Girls. So you can find it in your local bookstore. And Jeff Chung has been working with the JACL DC Chapter for quite a while, supporting us with our website, our logos, and our quarterly newsletters. And before he became an elementary art teacher, he was a graphic designer who made maps for the Smithsonian. He's been helping us with our maps, our graphics, and our online work. We've also been very fortunate to have a few student reviewers for our graphic novel. And to be honest, they've been pretty tough on us. We have Jonah and Sienna, who are currently sixth and seventh graders respectively. And they have been reviewing our stories to ensure that the fifth graders will find our story both relatable and relevant. We've included one of our positive comments from Sienna, whose comment was, "Very strong chapter. It was amazing. I have nothing to comment on. It was perfect. Double exclamation point." And we just put this in here because we wanted to note that this was pretty rare, and therefore it was a very cherished comment from our student reviewer.
All right, looking forward, we find as we get deeper into this project and we think we're done, well, we are far from done because there's so much more that we can do and are looking forward to doing. So the question is, looking forward to the what and the when. So first, we are in the process of completing the rest of the graphic novel. We've got the text written, but there are still infographics, maps, resources, illustrations, and translations. I think what Linda mentioned was for the immersion schools, we are requested to provide translations for language immersion schools in the language that is being taught in those schools. So that's the reason for translations. We want to make sure that the access to our digital form of the novel is free. So it will be on our website for all those who can access it. And we really want to make it accessible to all throughout the country, throughout the world. We're not limiting ourselves in any way. We really want this to be a service to other teachers, to other students, to other families, and citizens of many different places. Also, MCPS is now writing lessons this past fall, and we're still in fall, and is also in the process of writing training plans for the teachers that they will be training in January. And finally, implementation of the curriculum. We will be able to be delivering the graphic novels to students in April of 2024. So we're so excited to think 12,000 fifth graders will be reading our novel next spring. We also have begun, just scratched the surface of looking into options and resources for providing printed copies. We think that many children and teachers, readers appreciate having the hard copy so that they can underline, mark up, and also flip pages for, and we are looking forward to providing that as well. So those are just part of what we have on our plate. I'm sure we'll be adding more, but we become more and more excited with the project as we go along.
Okay, so we wanted to actually end our presentation with this Spark Matsunaga quote for two reasons. One, it's just a great quote. And then two, because Spark Matsunaga actually lived in Montgomery County while he was in Congress. And so the image that you see on the right is actually some of the panels from the end of the chapter where Emmy visits the memorial. And so, as Grandma May and Theo are leaving, she turns around and looks at the quote for a minute and really ponders it. And it says, "We believed a threat to this nation's democracy was a threat to the American dream and to all free peoples of the world." And after reading that, her only comment is, more people should know about this. And that's how we feel too.
So now we're ready for questions, and we'd love to hear from you. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you all so much. That was so interesting to hear about the process, both of like the mechanics behind putting this together, the storytelling choices. We've had a lot of sessions about writing this Tadaima, and this fit in really nicely, actually, with all of these sort of different approaches to storytelling and teaching through writing. So I want to encourage folks. I know we have one question in the chat. If you have other questions, please leave those. I will start with a question of my own that actually you all gave me, but I'm curious about now having heard a little bit about this, which is, how did you find your artist, Vicky, who you worked with?
So we actually worked with our comic advisor. He told us we should put together some specs in terms of what are the expectations for like the amount we're going to be paying, how many pages it's going to be, what are all the expectations. And we gave that to him, and he put it out on whatever his World Wide Web is. So we ended up having close to 20 people apply from all around the world. So again, we had people from Istanbul, from Portugal, from Belgium, Canada, California, Virginia. So all across the states and around the world. So it was really exciting to be able to look at these choices. And when we started reviewing people's portfolios, we were really looking for, can you illustrate children? Can you illustrate Asians? How expressive are your characters? What kind of background are included in them? So there were many areas that we were looking for, specifics, to be able to bring this story to life. And again, we feel like we've been very fortunate to find Vicky as our illustrator.
I just wanted to add a funny side, and that is that we got a lot of manga examples, and we were thinking this will not fit in a line with a story for young children. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, well, again, manga is great, in its own right, but we just didn't want this to be associated with manga purely because it's Japanese American. You know what I mean? So we just wanted to make sure there was a difference being shown there as well too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we have a question from Christine Minami who says, curious about the generation/timeline. Is Emmy Gosei?
So yes, Emmy is Gosei. Thank you for figuring that out. And we tried to incorporate everything into our graphic novel, including math. So that was something where there's a chapter where the grandmother is actually teaching them the generations and a little bit of the numbers, and just having her grandchildren trying to figure out which generation they are. So thank you for figuring that out as well.
Yeah.
Good quick math on the side there. That's great. And another question from Mary Abo. Did you have parents who objected to teaching a topic that would make students, quote, feel bad about government actions?
We don't know yet.
Yeah, that's true.
Other people chime in. We don't know yet. The test will be next spring, I suppose. I assume, Mary, that you're probably referring to maybe districts where there is a kind of strong voice about what is allowed to be taught in schools and classrooms and what should not be allowed. So we don't know yet, but we live in a fairly liberal district, I would say.
Yeah, and just to, piggyback on that too, I would say just in general, I mean, it's something that already happened in history, like it's not like it's private knowledge or, it's classified. So, and it's not really, necessarily making them feel bad for the government actions, but just seeing, understanding how it really came to that point, all of the paranoia, everything that was going on and, what resulted in it and how that really should not be repeated again. So it's really looking at it from more of, an enlightenment perspective of, looking towards the future than just condemning someone for the past is what I would say.
I agree.
I think the other thing too, when we look at our takeaways, we want our students to be curious. We want them to be critical thinkers. So our goal is to give them some information and for them to really be able to ponder and look at the information that's provided and come up with their own conclusions and decisions or judgments and why. So, and hopefully have some conversations. I mean, this was really, again, to open up people's minds in terms of that emotional intelligence and being able to see different points of view. So that's, again, some of our goals behind this.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back because I'm really curious about what the response will be, and also how teachers, and maybe you can talk about this too, because you're all educators, but how teachers will use this in classrooms and like what those conversations will look like and what the questions from students will be. Because, it's different even from when I was a kid. If this had been taught, the sort of larger context of our world is different than it is today. And so how students will sort of make connections or anyway, I'm very excited to hear about how that goes.
We are too.
Close. It'll happen soon.
Lessons learned also.
Right. No, exactly. Another question from Julie Abo about sort of how you made your pitch for this project. So what was the conversation with the district history curriculum specialist like, and how were you able to have that conversation and make a successful pitch?
Well, we were actually very fortunate because both Janice and I had worked in the curriculum office. So I have a relationship already with the person. So when we actually reached out to her, because we were thinking again that maybe we would be working on something for the high school unit that would be related to their Asian American Studies unit. And first thing she's like, "Oh, Linda, we want to talk to you." And they were the ones who actually pitched the 5th grade to us. They were very interested in being innovative in that way, in terms of how they can envision, this new curriculum, what it would look like, and how to teach it in a new fashion. So we were actually, it was just the right timing, I think.
I think the timing was right. The new curriculum had rolled out from the state, and then the district adopted it. And so the graphic novel provided the content of what they needed.
Oh, that's great.
Just for some comparison, I think their older curriculum in 5th grade was more about, I think, colonialism and westward expansion. So you can see that this is quite a change, because their first unit is going to be on, I think, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. So I think the second one is more on the Civil War, and then the third one is on civil liberties. So you can see just how drastic of a change this curriculum is.
Well, another question I had for each of you just in listening to this presentation was also about, I'm sure you learned a lot in this. I mean, you clearly learned a lot in this process, but I'm wondering if there's one particular thing that sticks out to you, whether it's a piece of the story, like the actual narrative of the history that surprised you or has sort of stuck with you, or a part of the process that has been a really surprising learning experience for you, each of you.
Well, I mean, I guess I can start and say, learning how to write a script was obviously a tough thing to handle for all of us, because it's just so different. Like Linda said, it's like being the director of a movie and you're trying to set up each exact shot. But honestly, after we kind of got the hang of that, I kind of, what I liked the most is actually how natural I felt like it was to write, to be honest, because again, as I said earlier, write what you know. I think all of us really referenced a lot of our past experiences that we've had. And it all really just flowed together. It was almost a little perfect, actually, just how well it came together and how many people it could reach. And it was just like, oh, I'm so inspired. So that's what really stood out to me in the process, was just how natural it seemed to be. And just like, it's a story that should be told,
Right.
So.
I think for me, what was one of the biggest ahas was the power of a graphic novel. The idea, I mean, I'm not an artist. I am more a writer, right? As Linda and Stephanie know. But the notion, I was thinking of a graphic novel like a comic book, or it's for children who don't read very well, so they need pictures as cues to unlock the words. But no, it's just a whole another part of your brain that works. And so for learners, it's very powerful in that it combines the two and not just one avenue, but the two together. That to me is an aha.
To piggyback on that really fast, I just want to say that, I think so many people have this stigma about graphic novels. Like, parents will come in and their kids will just want to grab all of the graphic novels instead of their, the chapter books. And, while I can understand that they're not the same thing, I like to think of graphic novels as kind of being like a way to really introduce them, like a gateway into reading even more, because it's easier to read it and be able to see the visuals. Like, it just helps with comprehension. And then eventually you're just kind of able to do that in your own head as you're reading just regular words. So, so I really think there's a stigma about it and there shouldn't be. So I agree.
I think for me, what's been a real treat is actually just the collaboration we've had with the different people. I mean, certainly interviewing Terry and Alice and Mary, who I've actually seen recently, with all of them within the last couple of weeks, and I keep learning more from them. So I actually look forward to having more opportunities to talk to them and learn from them. They've been really amazing, and again, they have such a wonderful point of view, and I guess they have really gone through life with a very positive outlook throughout this whole process, and in terms of their experiences, and they've always been happy to share. I know that Terry and Mary, Alice, I think, was on a recent virtual educational event, but they used to come into the schools and share with students about their experiences. So that's been wonderful. Working with the different organizations. Again, we keep getting feedback from people, and it's been great. We're learning a lot, and some things are very little technical things that are helpful for us to know, and so it's been a great learning process throughout, and I feel like it hasn't stopped yet.
Yeah, I think it will probably continue. We have a few more questions, so we'll see if we can get to all of them. Julie Abo asks, do you think other districts might pick up this book? Do you think there's potential for it to spread beyond Montgomery County?
Well, that would certainly be our goal. I mean, when we talked to the social studies supervisor in Montgomery County, she actually recommended that we talk to the state supervisor of social studies.
Oh, wow.
Because she said that there is a real interest at the state level for Asian American connections. So I think that's true in many states. Certainly some states have already adopted Asian American studies. So our goal is to, again, have it easy access. So if there's a school district that could use it, we would certainly be happy to have it available for them.
Well, we are fast approaching our time, so we'll end with when the novel will be available. But in the meantime, two questions. One from Ken Mochizuki, who's another author who's been part of Tadaima for the last couple of years, talking about some of his amazing work. Ken asks, as an author who's had his book or books banned in some areas of the country, are you ready for this book to be challenged or banned?
Well, sorry, Jadis, do you want to take this one?
Well, I mean, I'm sure we haven't had as much experience as Ken has had, but we hope to be ready and continue to move forward with the enthusiasm that we have for what our graphic novel will present and represent.
Yeah, I think, going off that too, you can't really control what happens everywhere, right? But I think that, the underlying theme, which they would know if they read it too, is really like love, family, empathy, like just really solid, wholesome themes that I think can be, used in a lot of places. So, I mean, whatever happens, but I think we'll be ready to have a comeback for that.
That's great. And just to close us out, remind us all again when the novel will be available.
Spring, April 2024.
Great.
In virtual format.
Wonderful. Well, congratulations. Good luck also on the rest of this the work ahead of you. I guess I won't congratulate you too soon. But thank you so much, Linda, Stephanie, and Janice, for being part of this and sharing your work. This is fantastic. Thanks to all of you watching for your questions and your thoughts. And thank you, Kimiko Mar and Caroline Kimura backstage for running everything so smoothly. Folks, please tune in for the rest of the Tadaima programs through the rest of the month. And we will see you all soon. Thanks again. Have a good night.
Thank you.